SEAGRASS follows a Japanese-Canadian woman who has recently lost her mother, and she brings her family to a self-development retreat because this loss in her life has caused her to have an emotional rift with her husband. So she brings her husband and two daughters to this self-development retreat on a remote island where they are there to work on their challenges, and of course things do not go as planned. No, it wasn't. So that, well, actually the cave was in the very first draft of the script, but what developed over time was, I guess not developed, but almost deepened over time, was what the cave represented. When you see the film, it relates to many things such as fear, generations, the past, history, what we can't make sense of out of life, and also more specifically the young character Emmy's grandmother. And so that did develop over time along with the floating camera or the ghost camera. That's a great question. The locations were really stressful to me when I had the script and didn't know where I was going to shoot them. I think about a year before we shot, I started to get really worried that we wouldn't be able to find this very specific cave. And also the retreat, because so much of the film takes place there. And, all the retreats in real life, of course, get so busy over the summer. So a year ahead, I went looking with our DP, Norm Lee, and we actually went to any caves that we could find, seaside caves. We even kayaked to an island to look at some. And the one that we found eventually is in Rosie Bay in Tofino. And it takes 15 minutes to walk from the parking lot to the cave over sand with all the gear. And you actually have to go around a rocky bend. And when the tide comes in, you'll actually get stuck there. So our time to shoot with a whole bunch of kids in these caves was about a 3.5 hour window. So that was stressful. Also, we found this cave a year ahead, like I said. And when we went back 2 months before shooting, the sandy ground had turned into like really tall pools of water and massive rocks. Like all the sand had gone down about 15 feet. So it was impossible to shoot there. But luckily over time, as we shot, it got to just the perfect level of sand for us to shoot in the cave. I feel that, I've worked with Norm Lee, the cinematographer, on all of our other projects, and it is definitely a format that we just feel speaks to us so much. And I think it really, especially for this film, captures the nostalgia of the 1990s and just the emotionality of the script as well. And something that isn't necessarily the reason why we shoot on film, but is kind of a nice product of shooting on film, is I think it creates a lot of discipline on set, especially for myself as a director as well, just kind of knowing that it can be very expensive to do takes that we don't need. I really enjoy the aspect of kind of being very pre-planned and very careful with what we shoot. I see the film as being a personal film that is very much fictional. So what I mean by that is a lot of the themes in the film are things that I relate to or understand on some level, but the characters, the events are very much fictional. The two things that I really relate to is kind of the Japanese-Canadian storyline, and kind of the history of that is something that is quite close to me because I'm also Japanese-Canadian, and the incarceration of Japanese Canadians is something that I have seen how it affects my family. And so that is something that I wanted to bring into the storyline. And also, I think I am someone who tends to experience a lot of anxiety. And so I think that a lot of the characters are going through that emotion. That being said, my family is very different from the family. Like, my parents did get a divorce, but I never saw my parents argue. My dad is very different than the father in the film. So there's a lot of things that are just fully fictional as well. I think the biggest challenge probably for a lot of first-time feature filmmakers is just getting the funding together. That was something that, of course, was just a huge challenge. It took a lot of time, and, it was constantly like, us trying to ensure that we had enough to make this, because it is also kind of an expensive first idea. Like, it did require some substantial funding, so that was a challenge. I think the DP would probably have a little bit more knowledge around the specific differences between how light interacts with digital versus film. I know I like the way it looks, but sorry, I can't give it better. But one thing I will say from a director's standpoint is, I think when you're directing something and it's shot on digital, of course, the director can kind of see how everything is exposed, which I can't see, of course, when it's on film. I can see what the light looks like in the room, but how it will be exposed once I see the footage is something I don't know. So I think, of course, it requires the director to really trust the DP, which I do. But yeah, that is a key difference from a directing standpoint. I think that our process starts very early on, in the sense that we really like to go in, both of us, very with a lot of the shots quite planned. That's just how we both like to work. So we do a lot of overhead diagrams, and we go through the script about 3 times. So we do a first pass of the entire script, and then we kind of revise it and make sure everything feels aligned. And because we've worked together numerous times, we do have quite a shorthand. And I think that, we both kind of know if something doesn't feel right before getting to set. And then once we get to set, it's really just like everyone else, being in the moment, seeing what's working, what isn't. Sometimes something that worked in our head, we'll see it and block it out with the actors, and it doesn't work. And so generally we've always been on the same page, and we just kind of both are like, what's wrong? We have to fix it before we shoot the scene. Yeah, directing children is really fun, actually, and I had a great time doing it. I think that I can understand why some people might find it challenging, because I think kids can often have a very different way of working than adults, and you might need to, as a director, adjust your way of kind of directing them and guiding them. But personally, I found it to be a lot of fun. It was one of my favorite parts of doing the film. And I think with each actor, whether they were children or adults, it was always a bit of, a question of, what does this particular person need, and how can I best help them to find the scene that we're all trying to find. I really love being a filmmaker because I think that stories allow me to speak to themes that are meaningful to me, that I hope people will find a connection with. And for me, when I tell a story, I never go into it wanting to answer a question. I always want to just pose the question, because I think that is what makes films most interesting. So yeah, that's why I like it.